Thank you everyone in the room and virtually for joining us. This was a little more popular than we anticipated. We have about 200 people joining virtually, and we have exceeded the room limit for Pathable. So we're trying to figure that out right now because we need our camera and tech guys to be able to join as well. But maybe as they're working that out, I can give you an introduction to me and the folks who you will be hearing from on the panel. So I think I said welcome to everybody already, but welcome again for those filtering in a little bit late. My name is Milazzo, and I'm a commercial product manager for eBooks on Science Direct. And I'm really thrilled to be here live in person today in Charleston. It's thrilling to see all of my colleagues and to hear from librarians because it feels so important right now for us to be meeting up and talking and really having a discussion about everything that's been happening since March of last year when we entered the COVID era. And I think that that's important in part because I've been in STEM publishing for the past 20 years. And that means I've been here for the full print to e transition. And that, starting out when the days when everything in electronics seemed like it was going to be sci-fi, that just was not going to be possible. And now we live in a world where e is almost everything since we're in the age of remote learning. But I bring that up because I feel like the changes that have been happening with COVID are even in some ways more important than what was happening with the print to e transition. And that's in part because they're happening so much faster and under a lot more pressure, especially when it comes to learning and research. So that's why we have a panel of people here today who are going to talk about some of those changes. And our panel is really going to focus in on eBooks and what's happening to eBooks in the library as a result of COVID.
Thank you. So I live here in Charleston, but I am from the Midwest. I'm a Chicagoan. So being here in Charleston with the weather, I have to say, Charleston Conference is what drew me here. And I got to say, it landed me here. I love this weather. I will never miss a snowy Chicago day. But anyway, I should probably stop talking about the weather and talk about the book panel here.
Yeah, tell us where you're from, Jean, your institution, what you do.
Medical University of South Carolina is one of about 5 institutions that are truly unique in that they are a school not associated or affiliated with another institution like a university. So we are unique in that our library is actually funding the medical institution. We have many colleges. We have, it's complicated, but since I've been here, we've also been gathering hospitals. So in addition to academic, we now have patient care resources, and we have a lot of acquisitions going on for South Carolina.
Yeah.
So
thank you, Jean. And that really brings into focus what we're going to be doing in terms of balancing different user needs. Mary Ellen, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Thank you. My name is Mary Ellen Sloan. I'm the science librarian at Middle Tennessee State University, and we are a regional comprehensive university with a primarily undergraduate population. And so have a growing graduate population, growing distance student population, and we are also trying to adjust and reflect on what the new normal is.
Thank you. And joining us remotely, we have Chris Palazzolo. He's the head of collection management at Emory University. He also holds a PhD in political science from Emory and serves as an adjunct professor for that department. And we're going to have Chris kick us off with a little bit of a remote presentation. So we'll switch over to that.
And I think what I really wanted to say was that I kind of wanted to, I intended really to start the conversation by talking a little bit more about the kind of how the pandemic really kind of increased or made very apparent a lot of the issues of ebooks that were already present prior to the pandemic, and how, when we had to move everything off, to online in March, how that, we learned a lot of that process, of course, and particularly it's a lot about education. And I was really going to focus a little bit on the education of our users, about textbooks and about user licenses. And I thought this was a really great opportunity for us as librarians to really show what we do and what we already make available and how we anticipate use in the classroom and so forth. And I will not tell you how many times I was told by somebody, why don't we have more than one user license for this? Or why can't I download this? Or why can't I do this or this? And I felt like this was a really great period of time to really tell vendors about how they need to make some of their materials a little bit more user-friendly and accessible for folks, particularly in the classroom and for pedagogical purposes. We'd already been having a lot of folks use a lot of our ebooks in the classroom, particularly in our medical school, Clinical Key being one of the big examples of that, but also Springer ebooks and so forth. So that wasn't really that new. It was really moving that into the humanities and moving that into areas that had not been so ebook, I would call friendly, or at least more ebook hesitant. And what I'm really curious about, honestly, is how we promote the print collection now, in addition to the e-collection, and whether or not some of the folks who are resistant to ebooks for such a long time, now they've had to use them in the classroom, and whether or not they could continue that process. I think there's still going to be probably a preference for some research-intensive processes to be done in print for some folks in humanities, but I think they've turned the page in some cases for them to move to the E in the classroom. But again, I think they've become very aware of DRM. They've become very aware of other restrictions on licenses. So I think that's something definitely we're trying to take an opportunity for. One thing we've done is really updated our ebook guides and communication with folks as they prepare classes for the fall, and for future. I will tell you, last year was a real learning curve in the sense that we actually were able to get ahead of the curve a little bit in terms of knowing what people were looking for and really highlighting what we already had in the collection: handbooks, textbooks, etc. But I think the biggest challenge really is, again, about restrictive collection dollars and a budget austerity that we've got, even at a very well-resourced school such as Emory, with the cost of ebooks and also of making those available, and the models we have for packages versus individual purchases and so forth. So I was really going to highlight a lot of those kind of things as kind of my main kind of crunch here. But we are going to be doing a library survey coming up in the spring, which we borrowed a little bit from the University of Cambridge, which was really cool, and that they really tried to ask the question, not about your preference for ebooks per se, but your preference for ebooks in the context of having a full physical library back at your disposal. Because obviously we had a big shake to the equilibrium where folks didn't really have a choice, or those who were local did kind of have a choice, but it was a lot of barriers because we could pull books for them. We have lockers, we had appointments, a lot of libraries did that. So that wasn't really a big, that was a barrier for them, not a barrier for those folks, but definitely a barrier for others who were working remotely. So I thought that was very, I think that's kind of where I am right now. And talking about EBA and DDA, we did go in quite full ahead with EBA and DDA, which, let me tell you, can be a management coordination issue across many divisions of the library, from the acquisition aspect to the cataloging aspect to the maintenance and collection decisions about what's in there. So all of that to be said, we are struggling a little bit about how to move forward with those and trying to use the data that we have in those programs to see whether or not we should just buy some of those when dollars allow, whether or not we should just purchase those titles outright. In terms of purchasing collections. So for example, we had a Springer EBA plan, which they call My Collection, which did serve a lot of good purposes during the pandemic. A lot of folks were using it, but we just found out that there was a lot of concentration of certain collections being used. So we're thinking, and also the same thing for our JSTOR DDA. Certain publishers are getting used more than anything else. So we thought that maybe we'll just buy those packages from Princeton, buy that package from Rutgers University Press, et cetera, and just kind of move on and just start doing that. Again, dollars have to allow for that, for that to have to happen. So I think that's kind of where we are. I think the other big thing is, and I would have our startup communication library bring us up to date here, is definitely the push on OER, making a lot of those open access materials available in the catalog, such as the University of Minnesota, the open textbook library and all that, making that available and really promoting those things. There's still a long, I think, what we'll call it a very long kind of steep curve there for a lot of that adoption slowly happening, but it definitely made it very clear to a lot of our users that textbooks are still a bit of a boondoggle for the library. And the last thing I'll say there is about the textbooks, and I'll kind of end on this, is that sometimes I feel like libraries take it upon themselves to be kind of the everything to everybody in terms of and becomes really apparent in textbooks. But really, we need to really work with our administrations and this made it very clear during the pandemic that it's a larger issue that we have to work in with upper levels. Folks think the library should have every textbook and every textbook is an E and everything, but we can't afford to do that, nor should we buy every textbook. So the point being is that I think we need to leverage this time to show the importance of textbooks, that conversation with larger groups, consortia, libraries, administration, government, et cetera, and so forth.
We'll just start off with questions for ladies here. First question, what role do eBooks play at your institution in supporting your users?
So for eBooks, with the sciences, we've been E-only on our science approval plan for quite a while. And we just made that decision primarily because we had to figure out, were we going to be partly print, partly E, or obviously not all print. So we decided to go all E. And I was a big advocate of that decision in coordination with the acquisitions librarian, because of the way that we felt that science books primarily were read, the full text searchability, and the fact that they would be available to multiple users at a time and available remotely. Of course, that's been a long time decision, and I think that served us well. And now that we've seen more EBA models and PDA models, and even, of course, firm orders being available with different licensing models, it's just really confirmed the belief that we had at that time that we had to have a comprehensive strategy that was flexible and that helped us to respond to the availability from publishers and respond to user needs.
Thanks. How about you, Jane?
Well, it's interesting because when I came on board with MUSC about 4 or 5 years ago, it was essentially an all electronic library. So it was at the cusp of becoming electronic. So a lot of the collection development at that time was gaining electronic resources that were implemented so that you had the textbooks of students, but also those core textbooks that, can't call them reference books.
Text ref.
They're, those core titles, the duties, those that are part of a collection that need to be part of a collection, but at the same time are not necessarily used as part of the curriculum. So you have 2 collections that you have to build. And so when I came here in Charleston, it was very much I had to build both the textbooks, but also a core reference, those core textbooks. And when it came to those core textbooks, I found certain publishers were better than others. And
All right. Well, that kind of leads us into the next question, which is, what you were speaking about, has the need for more educational and textbook content really shifted the focus or shifted the balance in supporting research and collection building? So maybe, Jean, do you want to speak to that?
Well, as I was saying, we shifted to an electronic environment well, I shouldn't say we, but before I came on board, the university was shifting, and my prior university was also shifting to an electronic environment. So I was very much aware of what was needed in terms of collection development for an electronic realm. And especially with the pandemic that occurred, you are given an environment in which you learn that you have so many students that are now suddenly in a virtual, and the library now has to provide textbooks, and you become aware of those textbooks that you have provided, but perhaps they were concerned users, or perhaps they were not available to everyone in the way in which you would like. So that was some of the challenges that we faced. We might have had the books, but some publishers, like I said, were fantastic in that unlimited users, and you're like, no one's gonna talk to me. I like that.
So yeah, it sounds like the licensing played a big role. Yeah. And how about Mary Ellen's?
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. Very well put. And I feel like the EBA models have allowed us to get a better sense of needs that we can meet without knowing that they were needs necessarily. Our university is trying to move toward OER and making faculty aware of OER programs and pointing to the text ref types of books. We know that a lot of our eBooks are used by classes. When we see those usage reports available to us, it's really still a question. It's still a question I wish I had a firm answer to, but I think that our strategy going forward will be to pay closer attention to those usage statistics. Let us provide more communication to faculty, and start to discern a little bit how we can better meet needs as they evolve.
Thank you. Yeah, and that raises a good question. What kind of, was it usage statistics? What kind of data or tools were helpful to you? Was there anything that came from vendors that you did yourself, or even that came from faculty that was helpful? Yeah. Or Jean, are you stealing the mic from us?
Okay. Yeah, so I'm sorry, your question was
about data. Yeah. What was helpful?
I think as far as that goes, and I'm just being completely honest, I feel like our approach has been a little bit reactive. When we see something with high number of stats, or we see that there's a faculty request in this area, then we know that it's a need.
Yeah.
And I'm just being honest, I think that I would like to find a better strategy. The EBA platform, not necessarily to plug, but Elsevier's Product Insights is a very useful tool to help us to kind of get ahead of what those needs are. But it really does take some attention, some time, which is always at a premium. I do really appreciate the support from all of the vendors and the product managers, and the evolution in of course, content and products that are coming from the vendor side. And of course, that's such a great opportunity here at Charleston to have those one-on-one conversations and try to be more proactive with our decision-making going forward.
Hello.
Jean, do you have any thoughts about the data? What was useful? You can note.
No,
You're passing.
Obviously I do.
Yeah.
I do, and those who know me know that I believe firmly in data. I believe in the absence of variables, if we can get to that point, which I know we can't. And I like where we are going right now in terms of collection development, in terms of getting a usage that can be applied across platforms. And I appreciate publishers that are working together for that kind of data. I mean, Counter obviously is our main, when we talk to administration, we have to talk in terms of some kind of terminology that most people outside of this room will not understand. You say counter, you say usage. I don't know how many people outside of us know what that means. So I appreciate when we can create a picture that we can use the data that's being provided to us and create that, not fantastical, there's a wizard there, like, doing that kind of thing. I know that's not going to happen, but I do agree for the fact that this usage that's being provided for us is beneficial and can help provide for collection data and hopefully get us money if we're lucky.
Yeah, thanks for that. And replying to some comments in the chat, we have not given up on Chris. We're still working on that to get him included here. And I think, Chris, if you want to comment in the chat, I'm happy to read any of your comments out for these questions. I'm going to keep an eye out for you here.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so everyone on Zoom can hear Chris. I cannot hear Chris, and we cannot hear him here in the room. So I think that's the disconnect that we're having right now. And I apologize for that. I'm not sure what we can do about that at the moment. I think we're probably going to plow ahead with questions in the room. I think we're going to try and find a way to represent Chris's answers maybe after the fact. So I apologize for that. And if anyone came specifically to hear him. So keeping with our panel in the room, I wanted to ask you, did your relationship with faculty and how you communicate change in any way? Because it seems like there was more demand for educational material, but that maybe the communication pathways, like our online and in the room here, are not as well established as we'd like them to be.
Sure. When a lot of publishers just went ahead and opened up their catalogs for read access beginning of COVID, that really did provide a great opportunity for us to reach out to faculty to say, hey, there's new content here that's available, and it may be useful to you as you're transitioning your classes online. And we've tried to sustain those conversations. There has been more movement on campus toward, online learning and developing OER products, like I said. So we want to sustain those conversations. Of course, there is the time commitment, and what new, good ideas we're able to implement and sustain over time is the question. So right now we're really in another transition phase. It's a transition to hybrid in a sense, and figuring out going forward what are going to be those content priorities for us. So I think information and being proactive is the best that we can do right now.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. In terms of our faculty, it's interesting because even though we've been in electronic environment, faculty didn't realize that we provided.
Mhm.
And so when we went remote, a lot of faculty were contacting, and I am a collection person. I'm not I am a librarian, but I'm not a reference librarian. I'm not the point of contact. I am behind the scenes. I have so much respect. Like I give,
Mhm.
I'm like, here's resources, and those amazing librarians, they disseminate the information. Honestly, it's not me, it's them. They are
Mhm.
amazing. So what I am able to give, I thank, because they also give me information, and I'm like, okay, we can get access to that. Yes, we can. Yay. But I've got to say, when it comes to the faculty, it's amazing when they realize how much access is already available to them.
Yeah.
They were kind of shocked, which is a nice,
Mhm.
I've got to say, it's kind of nice.
It's a pleasant surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, very much.
Wonderful. And it's glad to hear something positive coming out of that as well. I'm reading through the chat here, and folks are very much wanting to hear Chris speak. And there is an opportunity for us, perhaps, and I'm asking the tech team at the back of the room, is there a chance for us to decouple what's happening in the physical room from what's happening on the Zoom and let them carry on? Mm-hmm. Okay. The only alternative. Okay. Thank you. So for the folks listening online, the verdict on that is that there's not a way to decouple what we're doing right now and allow Chris to speak only to the Zoom room. So we're going to, yes. All right. So that would mean we would have to stop speaking in the room and have nothing happening in here to allow that to happen. All right. I know, not quite. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. So I think we're going to go ahead, and we have a few more questions here, but if there's anybody in the room, in the audience, who has questions or thoughts they'd like to share, we have an open mic over here. So you can head over that way if you want to contribute. And oh, did you have a thought, Mary Ellen? Okay, if you'd like to do that. Mary Ellen wanted to share some of the stats that they were finding during the COVID time that she thought were interesting.
Yeah, just because I was, in preparation for this and to understand how best to adjust our license, I was digging into our stats. And we had EBAs from Elsevier eBooks, and we had a 4-year period, and it's been kind of cycling where when we get a new 4-year period, the previous year will drop off. And what we're finding is that we have a lot of turnaways actually from older books. And it seems a little bit counterintuitive to me, but they do want to go back to those older books. And I think it is some of those key sources in disciplines that there may not be an update to. And so they're going back to there. Interestingly, too, we have a lot of turnaways here in fiscal year 22 for monographs. And so I believe these will be, I'm sorry, not turnaways, token use. We have tokens for articles and chapters as well. And so we're seeing that there was, out of our tokens last year, about 6% were for chapters and monographs. This year, almost 30% are for chapters and monographs. And so this to me is me getting back to that reactive mode, which I am not comfortable with, right? Because this was a huge jump from 6% to almost 30%. I'm rounding these numbers, but for these tokens for monographs. And what's nice is that we do have the statistics on what those are. I will say, and getting back to the counter question, I think that with the statistics, it makes sense that you have a lot of different views, a lot of different facets of the statistics. It may be useful to have one big mountain of statistics, which you can sort in different ways and see, okay, what's a turnaway, what's a token, what's in an EBA, and then what package they're from. And so getting a better sense on that, and then just understanding how to interpret that or what trends there are over time are the questions that I have for myself right now. So I don't really have a lot of necessary solutions, except that I think the solution is, in terms of being more proactive, is spend more time, take advantage of the vendor knowledge and support that is available to you when you have the time to do that, in order to, going forward, make sure that you're putting your dollars in the right place, because we have invested a lot of money in EBA plans, but then going back, I have to ask myself, was that money in the right place? It probably was to a large degree, but going forward, I do want to be a little bit more intentional and make decisions, really based on what the data are, so that we have the resources that are going to be most useful to our users.
It's very true when it comes to these EBAs. So I don't know, those outside of us, when it comes to EBA programs, when it comes to these evidence-based acquisitions, I mean, outside of us, how many people know what it means? It's like it's one of those where it's a title that a lot of people do not understand. You hear it and you wonder,
what does it mean?
What does it mean? What does that entail? And we spend all of our hours trying to calculate cost per use. When it comes to subject areas, we put weights. If you've got a subject area in which there's not going to be as many people versus as a subject area like anatomy that's going to have a lot, you end up, those of us who deal with numbers, that's what we do. Outside of us, no one cares. And all they want to know what is the end result. And so we provide to them a return on investment. We are able to do that. Certain publishers are able to give us those kind of investments, and that helps us a great deal when we are able to say that we spend X amount on one-time funds, but our return on investment, despite it being concurrent user, there's a lot of.
I was just going to comment, we've had a lot of comments in the chat about the effectiveness and everything of that with EBA, also comparing it to DDA. Does the panel have any thoughts about EBA versus DDA? The same, different, better, worse?
I would like to hear other people's opinion about that, to be honest. But I will say I did get some useful stats on our Elsevier EBA, and just looking at the turnaways, the usage, and then the holdings from books that we did acquire at the end of the EBA were useful. I mean, my impression, if I had to answer, if I was really pressed to answer that question, I think that it's really the librarian's job to look at that content very closely and make the decision based on that. But there's so many different models. And then I really, myself, I have a bit of a bias toward understanding the digital rights management very closely
Mhm.
and considering that as a big factor for others that might not be
Where they want to spend their time.
yeah, or it might not be as much of an issue. So I think we all have those focus points, but it's definitely nice to get a lot more information about the collections and just why the different collections were developed the way that they are, and whether those are even a really good fit for the university. Because
Yeah.
if you have to choose one over another, and then you're not really even giving DDA or EBA access to anything at all,
Beyond that.
yeah, you have to weigh that. Yeah.
All right, thanks. Well, we're coming up on time here, so I'm going to ask our in-room panel for some final thoughts.
Please come talk to me afterwards. There is no way in which I can conclude, because I feel like a conclusion would mean that I would fall over. So, anyone wants to talk to me, please do so.
All right, thank you, Jane. Mary Ellen?
Yeah, I think that, going into this new transition phase, we're transitioning in so many realms as well, with our student populations, with research, with the knowledge that's even being developed in the field that will be published. So it's really a matter of looking at those trends over time. So my concluding thought would be to dig into the data, because one data point alone might leave you with more questions initially.
Yeah.
But if you can keep working on it, ask colleagues, ask your vendors, over time, you will see trends that will give you some level of comfort that you at least understand what's going on now and what decisions that will mean for the future, or how you can communicate your needs to publishers and vendors will probably be dependent on your particular situation and the needs of your faculty and students. But you also do have to be proactive in having a dialogue with vendors and publishers on how their models might not be the best fit for you. And then they can take that back and make adjustments to their business model to better meet your needs, because they can't have a fit for every institution necessarily, unless you communicate, what your concerns might be.
Yeah, and I can say on the vendor side, we definitely appreciate communication. We want to hear what's working for you, what's not working for you. Don't be afraid to let us know, because we can't fix it unless you let us know that it's not fitting for you. So I think that wraps us up on a nice note of collaboration and ongoing conversation between libraries and vendors. So why don't we give our panel a round of applause and thank us for being here with us today.